Is Dr. Gabriel Fernando Salazar. He's a health coordinator with the ICRC, currently based at Manila delegation. He's a medical doctor originally from Colombia with a medical diploma from Mexico, University of Monterrey. He has a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins University, a diploma in humanitarian assistance and disaster management also from Johns Hopkins. Diplomas in tropical medical and travel medicine from London School of Tropical Medicine, and a diploma in health and human rights from the Harvard University. He is well experienced for a period of more than 28 years. And it is too much for me to read his experiences, but I will keep it for next time. I would love to say that he will be a next speaker in the in the next ACT. He will coming as the speaker. Over to you, sir, Dr. Gabriel Fernando Salazar.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for this opportunity. First of all, for me, it's an honor to react to mainly to the presentation of Professor Redmond. And as has been said, I have a more public health and disaster management experience after 28 to 30 years working in different disasters around the world, and particularly during the last 20 years working with the International Committee of the Red Cross. So I would like to highlight 2-3 points and making the links with the presentation, particularly with Professor Redmond, but with the other two colleagues, particularly in 2 main points. One is how to set up medical, particularly surgical programs in conflict situations and also environments, and how to respond in a comprehensive manner. I'm going to use as a case study the presentation, the experience I had in Gaza in 2018, 2019. And then I'm going to share with you a principle, a concept, and regarding what is protection of the medical mission in conflict situation. So first is how you use as an example the event what is between 2018 2019, what we call the Great Return March in Gaza, where almost every Friday there were Palestinians expressing their concerns along the fence on the Gaza Strip. So at that moment, unfortunately, there were a large number of casualties, mainly gunshots. And we see that the first response comes from the first responders, which are the members of the community themselves. Then how to bring those patients from that specific point and be handled to the emergency medical services or the ambulance service provider, which are continue to be close to the front line and even being exposed to different side effects of the confrontation. Then is how to be able to transfer those patients to the closer medical facility in a context such as Gaza. Now, to take as an example, quantitatively speaking, from the 30th of March 2018 to the 19th of January, when I was there in charge of the hospital activities in Gaza, working from Jerusalem, we registered almost more than 27,574 injuries. We managed to refer almost 14,561 casualties. And of this total, almost 6,331, which is 43%, were due to live ammunition gunshot injuries. And from this total, 87%, that's mean 5,513, were gunshots at the level of the upper or lower limbs. So we can see there was a pattern, particularly on the lower limbs, produced by gunshots from snipers. So the dilemma was what to do in a humanitarian context and also environments where you have limited resources, limited skills, and limited capacity. So the first was to save the life. The second was to save the limb. Third, to restore the function. And fourth, to do reconstructive surgery. And this is the new paradigm I want to bring to the table. How to do it also in a comprehensive manner is then after that, the surgical management is to provide physical rehabilitation for the avoid or limit or mitigate the temporary or permanent disability. And then we should not forget the mental health consequences and provide mental health support. And last but not least is the social inclusion and integration of people with disability. This is an example, particularly, there was this particular day when I was there, is the 14th of May. This day I will never forget. And we were preparing for that day, particularly at the same time, there were the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem, the American embassy, we were preparing ourselves for something quite complex in Gaza. So we decided to set up in less than 48 hours a triage area on the larger hospital in Gaza, which is Al-Shifa Hospital. We prepared with the people, the medical staff, the limited resources we had, and all this. And then, in question of 6 hours, from 10:30 to almost 4 to 5 p.m., we received more than 400 to 450 gunshots at the emergency room in Al-Shifa Hospital. Any hospital in the world would collapse. Nevertheless, we tried to respond, but at a certain moment, the system was almost down. So what to do just to save life and save limbs? So we have a multidisciplinary surgical team led by Dr. John Wolf, because he's a well-known vascular surgeon in England, and he was working at the level of the emergency room and the operator theater. So we set up 50 beds capacity trauma unit. But what were the consequences in a mid-term, long-term? It was the issue of lower limbs wounds with massive bone loss and contamination, large number of osteomyelitis, and then how to perform vascular surgery, as Dr. Mansoor said, and Dr. Ramson and the other colleague from Russia, is how to perform vascular surgery in limited resource settings with limited capacity and skills. And this is the principle of saving the lives and saving the limbs. Then it is part of the reconstructive surgery, and this is the huge dilemma, how to do, because as Dr. Redmond was saying about the issue of amputation after the earthquake in 2010, is how you respond today in humanitarian settings. We cannot just accept and go and do amputations. It's how we go a step forward and do limb reconstruction, particularly bone reconstruction. And this is an issue where you have infections, when you have limited resources, there is no infection control, there are no skills, there is limited sterilization capacity, there are no labs with reliable, there is no access to blood bank units in terms of quality and security. There is the issue of not being able to perform bone cultures. And when you have less than 2 centimeters, it's probably less challenging than having 3, 4, 5, even 7 centimeters bone loss. This is a new dilemma for humanitarian actors, and we really had problems to try to find people with the skills and the capacity to come and work and do this, perform these actions in contexts such as Gaza. So now we should not forget that physical rehabilitation is an important part of the comprehensive response at the earliest stage in the intramuros and then outside, providing mobility devices, wheelchairs, frameworks, providing prosthesis and orthosis for people who unfortunately were amputated. Last but not least, the mental health and socioeconomic consequences of those persons, where we know that unfortunately amputees and crushers and external fixators became part of the landscape. But mental health impact is not only for the injured person, it's for the families, for the relatives, for the society. The economical impact of these breadwinners for the household is enormous. So that's important also to think on physical rehabilitation, with even the prosthesis who produce those prostheses are even victims. And then we should not forget about the dignity of this person, how to reintegrate that socioeconomically and through sport activities such as football, believe it or not, or basketball or other sport activities. The second point I would like to raise is the issue of protection of medical mission in conflict situations. And since 2011, the LACRC has been leading a project where we call healthcare in danger, because it's important that to protect healthcare is a matter of life or death. What does mean, particularly speaking? We know the act of violence affect every day the health system. Violence against healthcare is one of the biggest yet unrecognized humanitarian issues in today's conflict. We know that has major knock-on effects on the life and the well-being of millions of people around the world. We know that has direct and indirect effects and consequences, and we should not forget that has a short-term, mid-term, a long-term public health consequences. What are the elements of this medical mission? Is the medical staff, the medical vehicles, the ambulance, the healthcare facilities, and the wounded and sick. And we should not forget in the middle of that, consumables, drugs, and disposables required to be able to provide medical assistance for people affected in conflict situations or disasters. So an example is how no respect for the medical mission. Hospitals affected in Sarajevo Hospital in 1993. Liberia, when I was in 2003, at the north on the border with Sierra Leone and Guinea. Lebanon 2006. Lebanon 2006. Attack to the ambulance and vehicles, Iraq and Libya, 2014, 2011. when he was in Misrata also. Attacking Lebanon on July 23 direct to the ambulance, wall marked with the Red Cross and Red Crescent emblem. Obstruction and ambulance at checkpoints is another element, how to get in the context such as Liberia, Sierra Leone, and when it was in 2003, we managed to coordinate a humanitarian corridor, how to negotiate with an 18 years old with AK-47, completely stunned, to bring the rationale. So my idea was finally to pass through and be able to assist community which has been isolated for a long time. But at the same time, as Dr. Redmond said, at the same time, we try to provide assistance to people wounded. We have to confront the reality of a health system which has collapsed. That was brought a baby with cerebral malaria. At the same time, I was trying to assist this person with a gunshot. But other things we have to consider is the military harassment of medical personnel and no respect of the neutrality and impartiality of the medical staff as part of the medical mission. So as an example of attack to medical missions in the news, Aleppo, Yemen, Kunduz Hospital, and how all these international media are raising their concern. And what to do, we carry out on a study in 2011, but we perform a retrospective study to try to bring data and raise the concern at the international community. What are the results of these diplomatic actions? Finally, is advancing protecting the health. How? UN General Assembly 2014 Resolution on Global Health and Foreign Policy. UN Security Council Resolution 2286 strongly condemns attacks against medical facilities and personnel in conflict situations. And last but not least, World Health Assembly May 2016 Global Strategy on Human Resource of Health Worker Force. So I just want to encourage you that all these people who are part of this audience, I encourage you to join humanitarian response, and these humanitarian actors such as International Committee of the Red Cross, we're just there to try to respond to the undesirable and consequences of conflict situations, which are supposed to be respected, and that's the purpose of Geneva Conventions, even world has fools. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and it has been an honor to respond to and to react to the presentation of Professor Redmond. Thank you so much. Over from my side.
Dr. John Crozier. He was a fellow of the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons, as well as fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, and fellow of the Australasian College of Road Safety. He is a Brigadier Director General of the Australian Defence Health Services, Army Reserve. He's a vascular and vascular surgeon, Liverpool Hospital at Southwest Sydney. Chair of the Binational Trauma Committee of the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons from 2014. Vascular Surgical Specialty and representative on our ACS Council, and co-chair of the National Alliance for Action on Alcohol. He's the co-chair on inquiry into the Australasian National Road Safety Strategy in 2011 to 2020. Our reactor, Dr. John Crozier.
Biggest volcanic eruption in almost 100 years. That is the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'api volcano adjacent Tonga. We witnessed the disruption of communications with a fibre optic cable cut, satellite imagery that shows the biggest outfall of effluvium, and a combined response of the oceanic nations that neighbour Tonga, particularly Australian and New Zealand militaries now sending aid to those civilian communities. That's the sudden occurrence disaster on a natural plane in this region, the Ring of Fire around the Pacific. But we've also witnessed the incursion of Russian forces into Kazakhstan at very short notice. We're seeing the assembly of military forces to the east of Ukraine. We're seeing significant military involvement in Myanmar, and it highlights a lot of the lessons that have been imparted by the presenters this evening. I'm honoured to have been asked to react to the comments of Professor Ali Khan, former Surgeon Commander. I want to praise him for his without fear of favour comment and underscore the strength, the integrity of the comments that he has made. I guess the first witness to the strength of a range of his comments was on the basis of my involvement with Australian Defence Forces in Rwanda in 1994. Now, as part of the United Nations mission, as is the case in the deployments that Professor Ali Khan has made reference to, the military surgeon is there to provide the health support to the deployed military force. A large part, though, of the presence of that health element is for the morale benefit of the force being supported. And that's important for those deploying as part of that health element, particularly in the periods of contingency, the quietude between frenetic activity when casualty events occur. But that morale aspect of the deployed military surgeon is a really key part of the deployment. The other key aspect, particularly with the uniformed health element deployment, is it is there as an agent of the national interest. And very important, most incidents occur in the scrutiny of media. So the behaviours, the morals and the ethics of those displayed in uniform, in the health elements, are on view and witness to the rest of the world. I don't make comment to the statement that if you can't bring the patient back, you have to push the capability forward. Now, that is a somewhat civilianized mindset. I've an infantry background, and I'm familiar with the combined planning activity with the combat operational management, so to speak. There are balanced judgments about how far forward you push health elements. The better returns often are fighting fit troops, well armed, well equipped, and provided the appropriate supporting arms, rather than risking health assets being pushed forward. So we sometimes accept casualties and deaths in consequence of that in the military, but we don't in the civilian sphere. I'd also highlight the difficulty of some of the decision making, particularly as it falls on the shoulders of an individual. There is a lot of benefit in sharing some of that load, and I do commend multidisciplinary teams that do game a range of scenarios that are likely to be encountered by the deployed military teams. And there is a lot of benefit in a devolution of the responsibility in making some of those hard decisions if it is part of a multidisciplinary team that call is made. I strongly endorse the statement that those teams are as strong as their weakest link. All of us have our good days. Many of us don't acknowledge the medics, the junior nursing staff, some of the support staff in teams in the way that we should. And the habit of regularly regarding, encountering, greeting, and getting to know the other members of the health elements pay tremendous dividends. Often the private who's perhaps been overlooked, who might be there as a litter bearer, I've seen when it comes to the crunch, often displays moral integrity and a fibre and courage that many of the specialists, and they're usually reservist surgeons in the Australian Defence Force who go on deployment, operationally they've become full-time. But the team is as strong as its weakest link, and the act of the individual is greatly magnified working within those teams. I'd close by a couple of the technical statements of advice also that Professor Ali Khan had made, particularly with respect to suction and lighting. You must, in whatever austere environment you go, carry your own LED headlight as a surgeon. I would commend Luke's, and I did see Todd Rasmussen's Luke's hanging from his neck in deployment into Ballard. With respect to suction, packs a large number, much greater number of packs than perhaps one is used to, are key in the absence of suction. And I frequently will push the proposition that Israeli pattern dressings, field dressings, are much need to be pushed forward and requested much more frequently by deploying teams than is often the case. I'd close to reiterating the statement that Professor Khan made in relation to the mission. And a key function of the health group, particularly the senior commander of that health group before the deployment, is to raise the concerns before you deploy. And frequently the technical knowledge that you have as a medical commander is knowledge that the battle commanders don't have. It's key to get those messages and statements of request in before the deployment. And my final point now, I do commend the references that you've made, Mansoor, sorry. I do single out Top Knife, and Asher Hirschberg, who wrote that book. I know that Ken Maddox gets a lot of credit for it, but the pearls in that book are of inestimable value in whatever environment a surgeon is facing trauma. I'll close with a quick statement of praise to Professor Redmond. Strongly resonating many of the statements that you have made, particularly with the need for the humanitarian civilian activities to be fully independent. The compromise that's made incorporating humanitarian activity within uniformed services, unfortunately, has seen the targeted destruction of ambulances in a range of the conflicts that we just heard reference to, and put at risk the humanitarians and the civilian activity, civilian organisations. I pay particular praise to the International Committee of the Red Cross for its demonstration, without fear or favour, its ability to dance with the devil, but to do the right thing by those non-combatants involved through no fault of their own. I do highlight too a book called Lords of Poverty. And in 1994, when I first witnessed the number of NGOs coming to Rwanda, I was horrified to see on the ground within a short space of time 98 non-government organisations. And the key task for many of those was to raise the revenue for the next disaster to which they would have to respond. I did have the privilege of meeting Gino Strada, who had been a benefactor and getting an entity called Emergency off the ground. I'm saddened to hear of his death last year, but I do highly commend the obituary in The Economist, a magazine that I can't commend enough if people are trying to maintain situational awareness of what is going on around the globe. So on that note, I'll close, reiterate my statements of gratitude, praise, and for the privilege of being involved tonight. I do wish you all well. Thank you.